Good afternoon, Facebook. Welcome to my office. Today, I just want to give a quick description of the system and method that we use. A lot of people don't really fully understand what they actually are doing when they vote, or what happens to their vote more correctly, and how it applies to the overall result. So I thought I'd just give a quick lesson on that. And we can, of course, get into some policies and other things later on. We've got a long election ahead of us. I think it's a 36-day cycle all up, although we're on to the second day already. So the House of Representatives, which is the lower house, is made up of 151 seats this time. It was 150 seats last time. And for the government to win or be formed, they need to win 76 seats. We're also going to be electing 40 of the 76 Senate seats. The way the Senate works is a little bit different to the House of Reps. Not every senator is elected every election. They do about half each time, and it's a very complicated process, and I'll probably do a video on that another time. So the House of Representatives is made up of seats or electorates. The official name for them is the divisions of the Australian House of Representatives. I had to look at that, couldn't remember it all. So each seat in Australia is meant to have approximately the same amount of voters. They do allow about a 10% variance. So if you live in a remote seat or a rural seat, the idea is that your seat is as valuable or as important as, say, a city seat, because it's all made up according to the people that live there. That's why in the cities there's a lot more seats than there is in the country. It also meant that's why boundaries get redrawn quite often. Every election there's a new seat, or seats will change. This can have a really big impact on the government. So for example, at the last election there were a couple of seats that were Liberal, and the boundaries have been redrawn because the population has moved, and they're actually now Labor. So Labor actually have a bit of a jump on a head start, if you like, just on the fact that they've redrawn the boundaries. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about, because everyone gets really confused, and the last 10 years of government with prime ministers being changed all the time has led to people not really understanding our system. So in Australia, we vote a party, not a person. And I think that's a really important distinction. Now, I totally get it. If you if you think Joe Bloggs is the head of the party at the election, you expect him to be there at the next election. But people don't seem to really understand that in Australia, we don't vote for the person, we vote for the party. So you're either voting Labor or Liberal or Greens or Australian Conservatives or Nationals or whoever it might be. And so each seat is won by a particular person. And that party obviously will have a leader. So the obvious ones are Bill Shorten as the leader of the Labor Party, ScoMo as the leader of the Liberal Party, sorry. So if one of those two parties gets the majority of seats, that's the person who's going to be the Prime Minister. And they've both now changed the rules internally within those parties. They can't actually, well, they can, but it's very hard for the person who is the Prime Minister today to be changed by a party vote. They've just now, both parties now need, I think it's 60% or plus of the party room to vote to change the leader. So it's not likely to be something that happens in the next election. So whoever wins or becomes Prime Minister this time is most likely going to be the Prime Minister when the next election comes around. So I wanted to talk about our voting system as well. So we have a preferential voting system, which is also known as an instant runoff system. So this is where people really get confused. So this is just for the House of Representatives, not talking about the Senate. I said I'll do another video for that. When you're voting for the House of Representatives, it's usually a lot less, 5, 6, 7 people that you're voting for. It's usually a green ballot instead of a big white thing. And for your vote to count, you have to number every person in there. So let's say there's 5 candidates. You have to vote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in order of preference that you prefer. So the one you want to win the seat, you give them 1. The one you like the second best, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Obviously, if you're like me and you really don't like the Greens, you'll put them last and number them number 5. Now, what happens then is when we count those votes, the number 1 person, if that person wins a majority, an absolute majority, it's called, which means they literally have won 50% of the vote or more, they win that seat. But most seats in Australia, they don't have absolute majorities. Most of the time, they'll get a primary vote of 30 or 40%, and then they need to figure out who wins the seat. So how they do that is, when there's not an absolute majority, they take the person who got the least amount of votes. So if I get my way, it'll be the Greens. They eliminate them from that seat. So there's 4 people left in the 5-seat example I gave. And then they'll do, so everyone who got, so the 5th person, if you name, whoever was named number 2 on that ballot becomes number 1. So let's pretend on my seat, there's a Labor, a Liberal, a Green, a National, and let's say One Nation. And let's say that they were numbered Liberal, Labor, One Nation, National, and then Greens were last, because I really want the Greens to be last. If there's not a 50% majority in one of the other votes, you eliminate the Greens, and then whoever voted, whatever vote they got as number 2, let's say it was for Labor, that vote's then given to Labor. And they do that until someone has an absolute majority. That's why it's important that you decide who is number 2, who is number 3, who's number 4, etc. Don't just follow the how to vote cards. You really need to decide for yourself, because it's important. Because if you follow the Labor how to vote cards, for example, most of the time the Greens are put number 2. The Labor will preference Greens number 2, and that means that and the Greens will do the same for Labor. That means when the Greens don't win, because they never win a seat, or they very rarely win a seat, their vote automatically will go, if you follow their how to vote cards, their vote will go to the Labor Party. So if you like the Greens but hate Labor, and which would be very weird if that was the case, but say it was, and you'd rather the Liberal Party win before Labor, and you vote the Greens how to vote, you're effectively going to give your vote to the Labor Party by accident, most likely. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's sort of the basic way it works. So that's the House of Representatives. So the Senate's a different thing. You'll remember from other elections, it's a big white piece of paper, and there's literally 50, 60, 100 different options, and you can vote above the line and below the line. It's a whole lot more complicated, and I do want to talk about that in another video. But the thing to remember here is that in the House of Representatives, which is the green ballot, you need to number every box, otherwise it's informal and it doesn't count, and you need to be sure that the people that you prefer are ordered in number. So for me, it's probably going to be, I'll probably vote a minor party. I'll have Liberals third last, Labor second last, and the Green dead last. I want the Greens out of politics. As far as I'm concerned, the Greens party is the most dangerous party in Australian politics, and I will do a video on that at some point. All right, hope that helps. We won't do a lot of history and how-tos and things like that. I will talk about policy for the most part during this election campaign, but at some points, I think it's important to also understand how the system works. All right, guys, let me know what you thought.